Good morning. It's Stephanie Graham, Sewpreneur. This is not about sewing. This is about grief and sorrow. And I know that is not a sewing topic for the majority of individuals who might happen to show up on my channel. But for those that have been with me for the last several years, you know that the Memory Bears and Keepsake business came out of a need after my youngest daughter passed away unexpectedly. And so occasionally I will share a devotion, and that is what I'm doing right now. If it's not for you, just skip on over it and I'll get back to talking about business. But if you have suffered sorrow, I think all of us have, and maybe you are close to somebody that's going through grief of some kind. It doesn't have to be a physical death, it could be the death of a job or a pet or a friendship, whatever it may be. I think that this verse really does, comfort us, whether we are on the receiving end of grief or we are on the other side of the table, I guess you'd say, having a friend or loved one going through, a grieving period. But Job 2:11 through 13, and I'll just paraphrase it. You can look it up yourself. But when Job lost everything in one day, and you can go through and read the chapter yourself, three of his friends came from three different locations. And I'm not even going to try to say their names or where they're from, but you can see that. So these friends came from basically out of state or out of town, three different areas, and they had spoke to each other before showing up at Job's house. Well, what was left of Job's house. And so the three of them spoke to each other first, and then they set out from their own homes to meet together to sympathize with him and give him comfort. But before they arrived, they might have already had a picture in their mind of, okay, what is Job going to look like? Wonder what he's doing. What will we say to him? And things like that. And I think that's just human nature, right? I know when my youngest daughter passed away, that's how people felt like, what will we even say to Stephanie? Or what will we even say to my mom? Things like that. And with Job and his friends, the friends probably remembered what he looked like beforehand, um, and maybe just subconsciously thought that that's what he would look like. Because it says right here, when they saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. And different versions of the Bible say, he was disfigured. But if you read it for yourself, you know that he was in really bad shape. He had boils all over him and things like that. So it says, when the friends, saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. They began to weep loudly, and they even tore their clothes and put dust on their heads. And that was a sign of sorrow. Now, if you think about nowadays, I don't know that anybody really rips their clothes and puts dirt on their head, but there are some traditions where people will dress in black, or they will have a black wreath hanging on their front door, which shows a period of mourning. And so that's kind of similar to that. And then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said a word to him because they saw how great his suffering was. And so when I read this, it takes me back to when my daughter Hannah passed away. People were worried about what would they say to me or how could they comfort me. And with my faith in the Lord, I knew that the ultimate comfort had to come from the Lord. And so nothing anybody really said or did for me eased that pain. And I did not realize the burden that they were carrying on their shoulders or the burden in their heart for me during that period of time for me. And now it's been 22 years since my daughter passed away, which I can't even hardly believe that. I mean, it was 2001 when she was a toddler, and it's 2023 now. But in my mama heart, it was just yesterday. Like there are things, I even get choked up now talking about it. Um, but the sorrow that they carried, yes, it was a different sorrow, and they could kind of walk away from it, but not necessarily, because once you love somebody, whether it's a close friend or relative, and they are basically walking through that journey of grief with you, it never leaves them. It will always have a type of impact on them. Maybe not as great or as deep as it was for you. Obviously, the wound for you is deeper than it would be for them. However, knowing that they shared in that form of sorrow and grief is life changing. And with this Bible verse, it goes to show us whether we are the ones in the middle of our sorrow or we are called to be the friend of somebody who is walking the journey of grief. It does touch us both, and we don't need to have words. We don't need to do anything special. Just literally, just showing up is enough. You don't have to worry about what to say or what to wear or what to do. Literally, just show up and be there. And this verse really got me thinking. It took me back to that moment when my daughter passed away, and the friends and family that showed up for me. Um, that there was a few that did. There wasn't many, so I can relate to this. Job was very well known. It seemed like he was popular. He had a great family. I know they uh, unfortunately were all wiped out, but his wife. But it doesn't say anything about his children's friends showing up or distant relatives showing up. It only talks about three friends who did not live in his town. And they came out, basically, to me, they came out of their way just to sit there with him and mourn with him, not to show up with a fancy gift or money. They didn't ship anything to his house. They didn't have one of their messengers, maids, or workers bring something to his home. Like they personally went out of their way just to show up and be there. And so if you're going through a grieving period, whether it's a loved one or an illness or a job or finances, I might not be in your town, but I'm always here. And I'm sure there are other people in our community that are here to help you. And then one thing that's like the salve on the wound is Psalms 46:10. And it says, meaning the Lord says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth." And so that's a promise, at least for me, that above all that I've gone through, the Lord is still here. He's still God. And I can still lean on Him. But I hope this video helps you if you are going through a period of grief or sorrow or you feel like you're alone. Just know that you're not. All right, guys. I'll talk to you again later. Bye bye.